What's up? Happy Saturday night to you guys. Hope you're having a good one. Whether it's Saturday night or you're watching this on the replay. Hope you're doing well. I am going to just do a little video tonight going over some of my favorite, specifically my top 10 pond fishing baits. This was a request by none other than Ron Holly, longtime subscriber, good dude, known as Bassless Chap here on Instagram, and I think he's, YouTube. I think he's only on YouTube. So, Clayton Brewer, what's up, dude? Doing pretty well, thanks. I've got two drinks that I'm going to be sipping on this evening. One is a beer by Founders. This is the All Day IPA. Nice little session ale. Just a little 4.7% alcohol. Kind of easy drinking, hoppy beer. And I've also got a little small batch local bourbon. This is a barrel proof bourbon from 291 here in Colorado. My brother gave me this sample just last week, and I've been giving it a go. It's a 128 proof, so very, very hot stuff. But yeah, just gonna enjoy myself this evening, talk to you guys about some pond fishing baits, and hope to have a little bit of a conversation with you guys. So hope you're doing well. Ron Holly, BC, Bassless Chap in the house. What's up, dude? Oh, whatever. Might as well just go for it. So I'm going to give people a couple minutes to hop in here before we just dive right into the list of what I think are probably my top 10 go-to pond fishing baits. So, again, it was Ron that suggested this topic the other day. We were texting each other, and I thought it was a good question. So, yes, Ron, if for some reason I start slurring, it's probably because I've drank all this a little too fast. Odds are, though, this isn't going to get me drunk. This is the equivalent of maybe 2.5, upwards of 3 drinks. I mean, this is probably 1.5 ounces pour or so. So anyway, cheers, guys. Hope you're doing great. Thank you for asking, Ron. The family's doing well. And we had my wife's 36-week appointment this week, just the other day. And honestly, I feel like the baby could come any day now. So, crossing the fingers for another week, maybe upwards of 2 weeks, because she's 37 weeks, I think, tomorrow. And don't want her to go too early, but at the same time, don't want her to have to suffer through going totally full term. She prefers to do a completely natural birth without any medication. So, the earlier within reason that we can do it, the better. She gave birth to both of our daughters, I think, at about 37, not quite 38 weeks. So we're like right on the money there right now. So anyway, let's get into it, guys. I've got a little bit of a list written down here of my top 10 techniques more than individual lures. So what we're going to do is run through the top 10. I've also got 2 honorable mentions. And as I go through each one, I'm probably going to break it down to my favorite 3 to 5 lures within that technique. And feel free to throw into the comments what your favorite is or any questions that you might have, specific baits that you've heard of or that you like and that I'm not mentioning. And if you're watching this on the replay, I will try to do leave timestamps in the description below so that if you want to fast forward through and hear about anything in particular, or if you are watching this now and you want to go back later and kind of skip ahead, you can do that. So, yes, Ron, if we've got a boy, it's going to be named after my grandfather as the first name and her grandfather as the middle name. So it'll be Wills Pearson long. And yeah, girls' names were still kind of whittled down to a final 3 or 4 names. Not going to mention those right now because I don't know, I don't want to jinx myself, but I have a feeling it's going to be a girl, but at the same time, still kind of rooting for a boy just because I've got 2 girls already. So, yeah, Wills is not a very common name, especially these days. You know, I don't know that I know anybody else other than my grandfather who passed some 3 years ago, named by Wills. So, yeah. Cheers, guys. Bourbon was his passion. What got my brother and I into drinking bourbon, and specifically why my brother is a huge bourbon lover. I don't know if I've mentioned to you guys before, but my brother is as into bourbon as I am fishing, if you could believe that. So, if you're into that kind of thing, if you like drinking bourbon, go check him out on Instagram at Beneath the Char, or check him out on any of the podcast platforms, you know, on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Again, Beneath the Char. It's pretty much them interviewing master distillers at most of the top name whiskey companies across America, old and new. So, pretty cool deal. Without any further ado, number 1 on the list for pond fishing lures, in my opinion, is the good old Texas rig. Okay? Let me see if that beer gets out of the picture or not. Looks like not. So I'm just going to scoot it over here. I don't want it to be right up in the frame. All right. So number 1 is the Texas rig. This is a pretty broad category as it is, but I think is the most versatile lure that you can throw in a pond. You're going to throw this on either casting or spinning gear, but really you want something in the ballpark of a 7-foot medium heavy rod and, 7-speed reel. So what I like is either a worm, beaver, or a craw bait. And my go-to is the Rage Tail structure bug. Okay? I've talked about the Rage bug a million times. Specifically, the chameleon color. Is my stream tripping for you guys or no? Because it's tripping on my computer right now. And I don't want it to be that way for you guys. Leave a comment down below. Let me know if you can see and hear me all right or what. Because it was showing that it was buffering just a second ago. And I'm trying to reload. Oh, it is tripping? Dang, dude. Let me see if it's my phone. Oh, how do I change these settings? Choppy video. What do you guys think now? Is that any better? Leave a comment if it starts tripping back up on us. Because hopefully this is a little bit better. But honestly, my Wi-Fi and my internet connection, and my cellular data can be a little bit bad out here where I live. So hopefully this is a little bit better. All right, Chris. What up, Frankie? All right, guys. Number 1, Texas rig, Rage bug. Specifically, the chameleon color. I've told you guys about this one a handful of times, and it is arguably just one of my most confident baits that I use, okay? This is a 2-toned color. Oh my gosh, I'm chopping again. What the heck is going on, guys? No. That ain't good. What horrible timing. Man, I was not expecting that we were going to have any problems tonight. But guys, I am so sorry about that. All right. Let's see if we can get through this. If not, we might have to redo it another time. But this is the Rage Bug in the Chameleon color. As you can see, it's got like a watermelon red type of top and almost like a peanut butter and jelly bottom with some blue and brown in there. So very versatile color pattern. And yeah, I always like to keep a stock of at least a few packs on hand because it is my most used color, kind of by a long shot. I do throw it in pretty much every other color as well, especially if I'm throwing it on the back of a jig or a chatterbait. But you know, I've got 2 packs on the wall here and one that I keep in my jig box. So I think I'm good for now. But following the Rage Bug, I would say the Rage Menace Grub is also a very versatile and great little bait to throw. You know, Z-Man just came out with the Goat, which is essentially the same thing, okay? Same exact concept. You get a grub style body with some craw kickers. Just a very streamlined profile and very versatile. This is the middle size. They make it in a baby Rage Menace and a Magnum Rage Menace, which I also like a lot. But typically speaking, I'm going to throw the standard size Rage Menace over the Magnum just because there's so much more you can do with it. The Magnum is going to be a little bit more of a bait geared toward throwing as a flipping bait or on a wobble head, whereas I'll throw this Rage Menace Grub on a Texas rig. I'll throw it on the back of a jig or a chatterbait or a swim jig. I will kind of do anything and everything with it, including flipping it too. So as a pond bait, the Rage Menace Grub is really tough to beat. And then lastly, I would go with like a larger worm, okay? And while we're on the topic of the Texas rig, I'd probably go with a larger curly tail worm, okay? Something with a little bit more action to it. So, specifically, the Zoom Ole Monster is one of my favorites. This guy right here is a 10.5-inch curly tail worm. This is the moon dust color. Check that out. Super sweet. It's like a watermelon top and like an iridescent blue bottom. So something along the lines of like a 8 to 10 inch curl tail worm would be my other option for a Texas rig. Now, again, you could throw almost anything you want on the back of a Texas rig. However, the more important thing to take note of is that I throw about a 1/4 ounce weight the vast majority of the time. I throw 3/16 a lot, and I will throw up to 3/8 sometimes, but usually not 3/8, just because if I'm going to step up in weight, I'm going to use it as a punch rig, and I'm going to go to about a 1/2 or 3/4 of an ounce to make sure I'm getting through the majority of the vegetation that I'm fishing. So 3/16 or a 1/4 ounce pegged Texas rig. Sometimes I won't peg the weight, but the majority of the time I will. And I'll throw like a 3/0 or a 4/0 EWG style hook. And I'll throw that Rage Bug or Rage Menace Grub a lot of the time. Okay? Also, same worm, that Zoom Ole Monster or something along those lines can be thrown on that same 4/0 just fine. So instead of changing the hook out to a 5/0 or a 6/0, you know, a Mag Monster worm hook, I would just stick with that same 4/0 EWG. That way you can rotate through different baits and keep your same rig. You could throw a swim bait on the back of that. You really can do kind of anything with it. So Texas rig is number 1. Number 2 is a Wacky Rig, okay? Pretty predictable, classic pond bait. I did not mention this to Ron when we were texting back and forth, but it's hard not to include the Wacky Rig when talking about pond fishing lures. Am I right? If you could only have one, it would probably be a Wacky Rig stick bait. You know, the Yamamoto Senko is an awesome one. However, it's a little bit pricey. So, in my opinion, the next best option on the market is the Berkley Powerbait General. You could throw this in the regular Powerbait like this or in the Max Scent, but roughly a 5-inch stick worm, okay? Just a standard stick worm. You throw an O-ring in the middle of the bait, use a octopus or circle hook, something that's going to give you a little bit of bite. I also really like the VMC Neko hooks. I had one close by here, but don't at the moment. So anyway, average size hook I'm going to throw on this is like a 1/0 right through the middle. What I find is that the General falls even faster than the Senko, though the Senko is kind of the industry standard for the Wacky Rig stick bait, okay? A couple of others that I like to throw as go-to Wacky Rig worms are the 5-inch Zoom Magnum Finesse Worm. I have this bait in like a half a dozen different colors. I like throwing this on a Texas rig, but I also really like throwing it on a Neko rig, which is essentially just a Wacky Rig with a nail weight in the nose. So this 5-inch Magnum Finesse Worm from Zoom is right up there with my favorites. And one other that I throw pretty frequently, but is more recently on my list, is the 6 Sense Clout stick bait, okay? Leave a comment down below, guys. Do you throw any of these baits? Do you throw any different baits when it comes to Wacky Rig baits? Yamamoto Senko, Berkley Powerbait General, the Zoom Magnum Finesse Worm, the 6 Sense Clout, and there's one other that I like to throw, though I like to throw it on a weighted Wacky Rig. So if you want a little bit faster fall, you know where the fish are hanging out, and you want to cover more water, the Strike King Zero is a really good bait. This is an Elastec worm, same size, same profile, 5-inch worm. Okay, but it is stretchy. So check this out. You can stretch the salt out of this thing and check out what happens. It will extend an extra quarter, almost a half of an inch as you stretch the worm out and bring the salt out. So it's going to make the bait a lot more limp. See that? It's going to give it a little bit more lifelike action, and it's going to give it a more beat up look to it. Fish tend to like that, in my opinion. Once a bait gets more beat up, it tends to catch more fish. So that Strike King Zero is one that is underutilized, but I would not generally throw it on a weightless rig, okay? Whether you're Wacky rigging it or Texas rigging it, because it has a strange fall to it. It actually wants to kind of glide off to the side, Whereas most worms, when you pitch them or cast them out, they're going to just fall straight down. That Strike King Zero has like it wanders a little bit. So it's not as predictable. The action looks even a little bit weird. But again, that's a sleeper of a bait that not many people talk about, and one that I do recommend as well. So Wacky Rig is number 2. Like I said, I would throw this Strike King Zero on a weighted Wacky Rig, something like a 1/8 ounce, maybe even a 1/16. Okay? Ooh, that's spicy. Number 3. This is another classic year-round bait, great for shallow water fishing. And that is either a floating jerkbait or a Fluke soft plastic jerkbait. So, I'll give you a couple of examples that I like. I still throw the Zoom Super Fluke as probably my day in and day out favorite. I've got it in a bunch of different colors. I know a lot of people have issues with the tails. I do too, but they're dirt cheap. So it's not really something that I care about too much. You know, when you get 10 in a pack and they're less than $4, it's really not something you need to worry about. So I know that 6 Sense and the Guggen Squad have put out their own soft plastic jerkbaits as of late, and there are a bunch of other ones on the market that are just fine. I also really like the Strike King Caffeine Shad. That one has a little bit of a faster fall and a limper tail. One that you can fish a little bit faster. Oh, I don't know where I've got that stored right now. But of course, I'm going to come across a bunch of other baits in the meantime that I'm not mentioning. As for stick baits, sometimes I'll throw a larger 6-inch. This is the Bass Pro Shops Sticko. Also a really good Senko style bait. It's about half the price or less than the Yamamoto Senko, but very comparable in action, and I specifically like it in the larger 6-inch size. So if ever I know I'm around bigger fish or I know where they like to hang out and I'm trying to weed out smaller fish, I'll step up to like a 6-inch. Okay? So again, back to the Fluke. This is the way that I like to rig it specifically. I will use typically I'll use a 4/0 Gamakatsu EWG Superline hook. This might even be a 3/0, but I'm pretty sure it's a 4. And there's a specific way that I like to rig this bait that is not just a weightless Texas rig, although that's what it is. But what I'll do is go in the nose a little bit further than you would typically go. I'll go all the way down to the bend of the hook before I pop out of the chin, okay? So you see I'm covering quite a bit of the bait there before I come out. And what that'll do as you run the hook through the bait is it will bury the line tie of the hook in the nose of the plastic, which does 2 things for you, okay? First of all, it's going to protect the knot, which is not that big of a deal, but more than that, it's going to affect the action, and it's going to cause the bait to dart and dive subsurface. If you have the bait rigged too far forward in the bait, if the hook is too far forward and that line tie is out the front, what you're going to find is the bait is going to want to rise up and out of the water with more frequency. So you have to work it a lot slower in order to have the action be consistent. So I like to rig it further back in the plastic so that the bait stays level or even dives down a little bit as you work the bait, okay? There are a couple of other Fluke style baits that I like to use, but let's move on to the floating jerkbait. And this is where I usually size down a little bit. So one of my favorites is the Yo-Zuri floating minnow. Another is the Rapala floating minnow. This is just a coincidence that the first one that I grabbed from each is in the brown trout color pattern. This is not like my go-to color pattern by any means. I would typically throw like a silver blackback or something along those lines as my initial toss. I also like the Rebel floating minnow. So there are a few different floating jerkbaits that I like to use, especially in ponds. Now you're going to catch multiple species. You're likely to catch bluegill, crappie, whatever else is in there on those baits as well, not just bass, but that kind of mid to smaller size that is, I think Rapala calls it the size 6 or size 8. I can't remember. And Yo-Zuri, it's the 1/8 ounce. So pretty small baits. You do need a spinning rod to throw those on and lighter line. But floating jerk baits and flukes are probably my number 3. And yes, I will just throw a fluke on a weightless Texas rig, generally a heavier wire hook and like a 12 or 15 pound fluorocarbon. Generally, I'm throwing that on either a medium or medium heavy power rod, fast action. Prefer to throw that on a bait caster where I can, just to have a little bit more accurate casts. Sometimes be able to skip it into tighter areas. Okay? I see no comments in the last like 10 or 15 minutes. Can you see me all right? Can you hear me all right? Do you have any opinions about what I'm saying? Guys, we got 6 thumbs up already. I appreciate you guys. That's awesome. All right, so moving on, number 4, and this is no surprise. This is perhaps one of my favorite lures altogether, and you guys hear me talk about it all the time, and that is a chatterbait. Okay. Now, the jackhammer chatterbait is my go-to, my number 1 overall bait that I throw, but not necessarily the one that I would recommend to everybody in every situation. I've lost a few jackhammers to laydowns and in unfamiliar bodies of water to me. So, if you're fishing somewhere that you don't know where everything is, I would go to a cheaper chatterbait, okay? Something like the original Z-Man chatterbait, or the custom, or even the Project Z, okay? Because they make the Project Z in a weedless version, and the cool thing about it is that it tends to ride a little bit higher in the water column, especially in these lighter weights like the 3/8 ounce, okay? So it's got a brush guard on it if you buy the weedless version, and because of the shape of the head, it swims at an angle kind of like this, not perfectly level. For whatever reason, it swims at a little bit of an angle where it's almost standing up. Not standing up, but leaning forward. So it's just a little bit of an observation. I've caught some really nice fish on this bait, especially in ponds. So I like the Project Z weedless. Obviously, I like the jackhammer. But another one that I'm a big fan of that I have not really gotten to throw yet is the new Z-Man CrossEyeZ chatterbait. So this is right in the same price range as the Project Z, but you get some really cool features out of it. So I want to say it's about $10. You can get them cheaper if you buy from Discount Tackle. chatterbait.com. Use my link if you're going to buy there. But a couple cool things about this bait are the style of hook on here. This is an O'Shaughnessy style hook. So once you get fish hooked, they're going to stay pinned. It's got just a different shape and design on that hook. And the other thing that I really like is the weed guard, okay? It's a dual strand wire weed guard that is totally adjustable. So if for whatever reason you did not want to use this weed guard, you can just bend it down and out of the way like that, put it next to your trailer without having to cut it off, and it is totally out of the way, okay? Check that out. Now, vice versa, if you know you're fishing around heavy cover, like laydowns and other places that you would not throw a typical chatterbait. Most people are going to throw a chatterbait around grass or maybe a riprap bank, okay? But this bait right here can be fished around wood. So you can crank up these wires, turn them out and up, and all of a sudden this bait is extremely weedless. You'd have to put a fair amount of pressure on this bait to set the hook. Probably not quite as much as like a frog, but this is a pretty substantial weed guard. So I absolutely love that design, and for the price, there's nothing like it on the market. So you can throw this chatterbait where you can't throw any other chatterbaits. The other chatterbait that I used to throw, and it's not a Z-Man chatterbait, it's a bladed jig, that I used to throw a fair amount around laydown wood. I don't have a standard version here, I just have the naked one. This is the Strike King Rage Blade, okay? And what's unique about it is it has the lead attached directly to the blade, so it actually remains very snagless. It doesn't roll over like other chatterbaits do, and when it does, the blade goes with it. So the blade acts like a weed guard. So that one is surprisingly good in wood as well. So those are the chatterbaits that I recommend most. As you know, my top trailer choices for that bait are probably first the Yamamoto Seiko. Pretty classic trailer there, designed to go on the back of a chatterbait. Bait fish profile. After that, I would go with like a Rage Menace Grub or the new Z-Man Goat. So this pairing right here is one that I intend to leave paired up. This is what I sent to Ron like a month ago. This is the CrossEyeZ chatterbait paired up with, or I think I sent Ron the jackhammer, but this is the trailer, the Z-Man Goat in that Heights Hot Craw color. So same exact color. Now they do make the CrossEyeZ in like a fire craw color, which is super cool because if you guys didn't know, last year the fire craw color was by far the most popular chatterbait on the market, most popular color. It was impossible, and probably still is next to impossible, to get your hands on one of these. I have a couple of them in my possession, but what's cool is that Z-Man expanded and decided to create a few of their other chatterbaits in the fire craw color. So they're selling the original chatterbait, the new CrossEyeZ, and I think one or two others in the fire craw color pattern, and not just the jackhammer. So I think that's pretty awesome. Jim King asks a question. Have I ever thrown the Freedom weedless chatterbait? Yes, dude, I have. Got a couple in here as well. So here's the thing about the Freedom, okay? It's a little bit more erratic. I've got both the Freedom chatterbaits right here. This is the swinging football head, the CFL, and this is just the Freedom chatterbait with the Swimbait head on it. The reason I've got the heads by themselves is that I've got the hooks and skirts here separated. So I'll show you how you hook them up, how the concept works. And what's cool about this style of bait is that you can change out the hook and the head whenever you want to, okay? I don't have the matching colors with the right hook right now, so I'm just going to put this chartreuse and white on this bluegill head right now just for the sake of showing you. But use an EWG style hook with like a longer line tie, okay? And here's why. What you do is you put the hook onto the connector and it literally twists right around and goes onto the head. See if I can do this live. Slide that back up on there, and what you're left with is this guy. So I love the idea of this bait and the fact that it's got an interchangeable hook design, but what I don't necessarily always love about it is that it's a free swinging head. Okay? That is not always a good thing, especially when you're fishing in and around cover. If you're fishing around rock or you're fishing a little bit deeper, I think that can be a great thing. So in my experience, Jim, I don't throw the Freedom chatterbaits as much as I thought that I would. And I think I will throw the CFL quite a bit more this year and moving forward. But yeah, that is my logic on it. The CFL comes in some heavy weights. So I decided to buy them up in 3/4 ounce for the most part. And I will fish them like a standard wobble head on the bottom. Fish them low and slow. Where I know there's rocky bottoms, I'm just going to grind the bottom, bump the bottom, and keep like a beaver style bait on the back of that and see how she goes. I didn't have the chance to fish it as much this past summer as I thought I would, but I do really like the concept. So shout out to Freedom for what they do. I like their patent. I like the system. I just am not totally sold on it, especially with the EWG hook on there. So I guess the long-winded way of answering your question, Jim, is that I see it more as a lake fishing bait than a pond fishing bait. If you're going to fish a weedless chatterbait, I would go with either one of those two that I just mentioned, the Weedless Project Z or the new CrossEyeZ chatterbait, okay? And let's move on to number 5 on the list. Now, a little alternate bait that you could throw if you're not as much of a bladed jig or chatterbait type of guy would be a spinnerbait, okay? The spinnerbait did not make the list here for me tonight in the top 10, but it is kind of a tried and true old school lure that a lot of people have a ton of confidence in. I still catch some good spinnerbait fish every year. However, I don't use it as a go-to lure for me. Now, sometimes I will size down and throw like the Booyah Pond Magic spinnerbait that is small. It's like a 3/16, really small spinnerbait. It's a tandem style. It's got a willow leaf on the back and a Colorado on the front and a small like 2/0 hook. So I will throw that from time to time, but a chatterbait is one of my go-to baits just anywhere I go. So that gets the nod for me over a spinnerbait, but both kind of fall into a similar category of bladed baits that put out a lot of vibration and are reaction baits. So anyway, let's move on to number 5. And technically, this bait should have made the list if we were going in order. This bait should have made the list before the last one that I just talked about, and that is the swim jig. Okay? The swim jig is essentially a swim bait on steroids or a finesse version of a chatterbait. So, no blade on there, but yes, skirt on there. So, one of my favorite finesse swim jigs to throw is the Strike King Tour Grade swim jig. I throw this in the smaller 1/4 ounce size. And as you're going to see with all these baits, I pretty much like to throw my swim jigs with swim bait trailers on the back. Okay? I'll throw a paddle tail bait like a Keitech the vast majority of the time. Like I mentioned, a Strike King Rage Menace Grub is also a great option. But, and you could throw kind of a wide variety of different trailers on the back of a swim jig. You could throw craws and get more of like a flapping action. But I like a little bit more of a bait fish type of profile because I tend to fish a swim jig like I would a spinner bait. Kind of higher in the water column where I can usually see the bait coming back to me. So white and chartreuse is one of my go-to colors. Again, this is the 1/4 ounce Strike King Tour Grade swim jig. It's got a relatively light wire hook on there. It's probably a 2 or 3/0, and it has a pretty light weed guard on there. Okay, next, I will make my own swim jigs a lot of the time. And so this essentially is just a standalone swim bait that I decided to throw a skirt on in front. So this is the Strike King Squadron Head swim bait jig head. These are awesome for standalone swim baits, also great for umbrella rigs. But I believe this is the 1/8 ounce size. Could be a 1/4. And this is a 3.75 inch Strike King Rage swimmer. Same thing as the 3.8 inch Keitech that I've got here. So same concept. This is like a 1/8 or a 1/4. This is a 1/4. And then sometimes I will step it up and go to something larger. So Ron Holly, here's looking at you. If you want to step up your swim jig game, here is a 6 Sense Divine Swim Jig or Divine Swim Bait Jig Head with a weed guard on it. You can buy these. This is unpainted, and it's like a 3/8 ounce, 5/0, something like that. It comes with a screw lock on it, which I love that keeper system, especially when you're going to throw a larger swim bait. So this here is the Beast Coast Miyagi swimmer, one of my favorite soft plastic swim baits to throw, just right in that mid size. I think it's 4 3/4 inches, so it's got a meaty profile. It's big enough, but it's not overly intimidating. So when you compare this side by side with that Strike King and Keitech, it's got a significantly larger profile and is going to appeal to bigger fish. So I'll usually start with the 1/4 ounce, and as I get into either deeper water or I know that there's big fish hanging around or there's big bait, big bluegill even, I will throw this larger swim jig. Okay? We're halfway through. Sheesh. I don't know how long we've been on, but This will move a little bit faster now because we've got just one more category before we move on to top waters. And next up, just going a little bit more finessey than what I just talked about, is a standalone swim bait. Okay? I like to rig a swim bait two different ways. One is like so, on an exposed jig head. This is a 5-inch Scottsboro tackle swimmer. You know, I'm not super picky about my swim baits. This is a 6 Sense Divine swim bait. This is a Strike King Rage swimmer again. I've got a lot of Keitechs behind me. The new 6 Sense Whale is an awesome option. So I will throw an exposed jig head where there's not heavy grass. It's not super deep. I will run this thing kind of low and slow, closer to the bottom. Now, where it is grassier and you're prone to losing baits or snagging up, or you're picking up grass on next to every cast, there are a few baits that I like to throw weedless as a standalone swim bait. So the first one is this new 6 Sense Whale. It's designed for this application. It's got that belly slit. It's got some fins for stabilization. It's got a relatively soft tail and softer body than the Divine swim bait. As you can see, the Divine swim bait has a tighter kick, and that Whale has a wider kick. Okay. Next up is the Optimum Baby Boom Boom swim bait. This is underrated, but a really good one. Both of these baits have a fair amount of head kick to them. Head kick, head movement. So in addition to the tail kicking, in conjunction, the head will wag. Okay? And that is something that is severely underrated on the market these days. Something that people don't talk about enough, and also something that exists on this bait here. This is the Megabass Mag Draft Freestyle. This comes in a 6-inch version, and I think that's the only size they make it in right now. Again, kind of similar to the Whale, this bait has a fair amount of kick, but it has to be fished at kind of a perfect speed, which is like a true medium, almost medium fast retrieve. So what I'll do is throw this out there, let it fall, and rest where it is. Sometimes you'll get bit on the fall, but either way, I'll let this go to the bottom, and then I'll reel it at a medium fast pace, and it will rise a little bit, and I like to fish it kind of in the middle of the water column. It has enough displacement that it puts out a reasonable vibration. If you throw it in a brighter color like this, fish are going to see it from a pretty far ways away. So, as you can see, the Baby Boom Boom and the Whale are right in that 4.5-inch range. And the Freestyle, the Mag Draft Freestyle, is a 6-inch bait, so significantly bigger. So again, in the same situations that I'll throw the Miyagi swimmer on a swim jig, I will throw the Mag Draft Freestyle. That said, I do love throwing the Miyagi swimmer as a standalone swim bait as well. Okay? And there are a handful of others, but I'm not going to go through every single one right now. The Jackal Rhythm Wave is good. The Megabass Spark Shad is good. There are a bunch. So, if you have follow-up questions, feel free to hit me up by email or text me. Leave a comment down below the video. Whatever you want. I will try to get back to you. Okay? So moving on from soft plastic swim baits, I didn't mention the hook sizes on those soft plastic swim baits, but for the most part, I'm throwing these 5-inch baits on like a 3/8 ounce head with something like a 4/0 hook. And on those weedless baits that are all, right in that 4 to 5-inch range, I'm throwing on an Owner Beast 4/0 hook, which I think is a 1/8 ounce weighted hook. And then the larger the Magdraft Freestyle, I throw on a 6/0, which is the same size hook I will throw on the Beast Coast Miyagi swimmer. Okay, so I think that's a 3/8 ounce weighted, keel weighted swim bait hook. So 4/0 and 6/0 are kind of my go-tos. Okay, so now we've gone through soft plastic baits on a Texas rig, on a Wacky Rig, as a Fluke, and as a swim bait. Also talked about swim jigs and chatterbaits and kind of spinner baits. Moving on, top water is one of my favorite ways to catch them, especially in ponds. If you're fishing early morning or late night, it is the best way to catch them. If you're fishing bodies of water that are not very pressured, also a great way to catch them. So I'm going to talk about 4 categories of topwater baits that I like to throw in ponds all summer long. And I will throw these baits as soon as the kind of post-spawn, which here is in like late May. So all the way from late May, early June through the end of September is when I'm throwing topwater. Okay. So first up on the list is a Whopper Plopper. It is absolutely difficult to beat a Whopper Plopper, especially in the last few years here. Okay? If you're not throwing a Whopper Plopper, you need one. There are 2 sizes that I like to throw more than anything. And there are a couple plopper style baits that I will throw, but the River to Sea Whopper Plopper is my favorite for sure. So the 110 size, in my opinion, is the best for catching big fish. If you know you're fishing in a body of water that has pretty good sized fish, I will throw this 110 size a lot. The 130, in my opinion, is more of a lake fishing bait or a gear specific bait. You really need a very heavy power rod to throw that bait on because it weighs like 1.5 ounces or a little bit more, maybe even pushing 2 ounces. So what's cool is that the 110 is much more castable. It weighs just about 1 ounce, and it has a very similar profile, but even a little bit more realistic. So the huge 130 looks more like a submarine. And what is one thing that I don't like about it, aside from the fact that it's so heavy and makes you more prone to backlashes, is that there's some separation between the tail and the body. And the wire is prone to bending a little bit, which can affect the action and also create a weak spot in the bait where grass can collect. Okay, and that can be extremely frustrating, especially if you get grass caught in that spot of your bait early in the cast, because what's going to happen is it's going to trip up the actual propeller and the bait is going to spin all the way back to the boat, back to the bank, wherever you're fishing, okay? And you're going to get a lot of line twist, and you're probably going to backlash a lot more after that. So I'm not the type of guy who likes to throw a swivel in front of a Whopper Plopper. Instead, I go to the more refined sizes that are better designed, that are newer on the market. So the 110 actually has this design where the tail kind of fits into the body, and it prevents the grass getting stuck. It also has a little bit more of a bait fish type of body, which sits in the water, runs a little bit truer in my opinion. It's not quite as loud, but it's a whole lot easier to cast, and it is still pretty dang loud. So the 110 is my go-to. I kind of skip the 90. I have a few of them in my box. I will throw them from time to time, but in my opinion, that is the most subtle of the whole line. The 90 is my least favorite by a long shot. The 75, on the other hand, I love. It's got that same bait fish type of profile, that deeper belly. The 90 looks a little bit more like a mix between the 110 and the 130. A little bit more streamlined, kind of a thin profile. Whereas if you look at it versus the 75, the 75 has a lot more bulk to it. A lot more presence in the water, just about the same size hooks on it, and it makes more noise than the 90 does. So, Whopper Plopper 110, Whopper Plopper 75 are my recommendation. Now, the buzzbait fits into the same category as the Whopper Plopper. It's really a top water, straight retrieve type of bait. However, what I like more about the Whopper Plopper than a buzzbait is that you can fish it on a stop and go retrieve. You can fish it a number of different ways. You can pull it and stop it and work it kind of like you would a popper, and it's just going to spit a lot. You can fish it fast, slow it down. Fish it fast, slow it down. You can fish it on a deadly slow retrieve because it's not going to sink. But typically speaking, you're going to get the most bites when you fish the Whopper Plopper on a retrieve speed that puts out the most amount of noise. Okay? So fish are going to come up and blow up on that Whopper Plopper when they can hear it the most. I often think that fish are trying to kill a Whopper Plopper more than anything. Same concept as a buzzbait. It's annoying. It's not that they think that it's real or realistic. It's that noise that it makes, the vibration that it puts out, that they just can't stand. So, you throw a Whopper Plopper to cover water, find fish, and then once you find them, you're going to slow down with a different presentation. Like, next up is number 8, and that is a popper, okay? There are a lot of different poppers that I throw. The most classic is probably the original Rebel Pop R. It's got a pretty standard rattle in there. Not too loud, not too quiet. Pretty aggressive cupped face. The old ones were made different than the new ones are, so what I'll do is shave down that bottom lip to give it just a little bit better walking action so that it's not too much of a one-trick pony. But that Rebel Pop R is a good one. One that I haven't thrown yet, but look forward to throwing, is the Berkley Bullet Pop. I picked these up late last year. Has more of a deep knocker type of sound to it, and just a different body profile. Then a few others that I have that are higher end that I intend to really get to know this year and would recommend that you check out. I can't swear by them because I haven't thrown them all that much, but they're like 5 or 6. First is the dual hardcore popper, 70 size. I think they only make it in one size. What's cool about this bait is it has a magnetic weight transfer system. So this thing is going to cast a mile, and then it has a pretty quiet rattle in it. It's got a very good shape, realistic paint schemes on it. Love that bait, and it's a great price. I want to say it's like 10 bucks. Next up is the new, well, newly brought back, and this is the Lucky Craft G Splash 80. And this is the rattling version. Relatively loud. It's got a very like 45-degree mouth on it. So this thing is meant to chug and kind of stay in place a little bit more. I look forward to trying that out. This one is the Evergreen OB68. That stands for One Bug 68. It has multiple different types of rattles in it, but has a relatively high-pitched sound. Great little design on the cup. And this bait can be fished in multiple ways. So, it's a good walker. It's also a good popper and chugger. So, next up after that are two baits that are extremely similar. Like same exact body. And this is the Yellow Magic Magnum Popper. And this is the Don Iovino Splash It. So, as you can see, these things look identical, roughly. They sound pretty dang similar too. So, hard to say which one I recommend more or which gets bit more because I don't know. Only thing I do know is the Splash It by Don Iovino is a little bit cheaper than the Yellow Magic, but not by much. And then lastly is the Rio Rico. And I would say it's the most obnoxious popper that I have, and probably why it gets bit so well. Now it is ridiculously expensive. I think it's over 20 bucks, like $22. So it's no joke price-wise. But here's the thing. With topwater poppers, the only time you're going to lose them is when you make an errant cast and you cast too close to a lay-down tree or a piece of wood or something that you shouldn't be taking giant risks with. Okay, so I feel pretty good about spending a little bit more money on topwater baits just because I lose a lot less of them than I do crankbaits or other things like that. So, next category, which is number 9, and this is a wake bait. Yeah, Bassless. Yeah, Ron, I do have the Pop Max. I I just can't quite speak to it right now, okay? It's got a quieter rattle on it. It's got a bigger profile. And I do like the unique design that it's got those slits in the gills, okay? So it is going to leave a bubble trail behind it, but for being the same price as like the Rio Rico, I can't quite tell you that it's a better move. In fact, I think the Rico, and I throw the larger, the Rio Rico, and the Magnum size of the Yellow Magic, and the Don Iovino Splash It in the 1/2 ounce size. So all of those are the larger size. They make a quarter and they make a half. I like the 1/2 ounce size because I can throw it on either a bait caster or a spinning rod, and I just like the versatility. If it's a 1/4 ounce, I'm pretty much always going to throw it on a spinning setup, and that's just the way it is. Now, the dual hardcore and the evergreen are made in 3/8 ounce sizes, so just something to keep in mind, something that I like. So the one other that well, there's two others that I didn't mention that are in my box. One is the Strike King KVD popper, and one is the Rapala X-Rap pop. Both of these are good. I like to walk the Strike King a little bit more, and I like to pop in place the X-Rap pop, just for the sound that it makes and the way that they look and sit in the water. So I don't really have much opinion on the Hula Popper, Ron. Can't tell you about that, but I know it's more old school of a bait with that open mouth concept. I think it's a bait that you're going to work slower. So just kind of a straight bloop style popping retrieve. Whereas most of these baits that I just mentioned, you can really mix it up. So I will throw it past a piece of cover and I will walk it up to that piece of cover and kill it, and then pop it, pop, pop, work it slower past that piece of cover, and then I will walk it again after I pass it. That way you're making the most out of your retrieve. Don't have to waste much time. So, Riley, what's up? Hope you're having a great week as well. Family's doing well. Baby's coming soon. My wife's at work. Thought she had a contraction or two this morning. She is just about 37 weeks. So, yeah. Appreciate you asking. Okay. Number 9 is the wake bait. Now, I've got 3 or 4 different kinds of wake bait in here. Ranging from crankbait style wake baits that you're going to fish on just a straight retrieve, like the new Strike King KVD 2.5 wake bait that's got a knocker in it. Strike King, or 6 Sense, makes a movement 80 wake bait. Berkley makes the Wake Bull. There's a lot of different baits in that category. Then next up is like a Swimbait type of body for a wake bait. And this is going to be a single jointed wake bait. Something that you can fish a little bit faster on the top of the water. So that first one, like the crankbait body, is one that you're going to fish kind of a medium speed retrieve that you want bulging the surface. Typically, they're made to where they will blow out if you fish them too fast. They will, they'll mess up. If you fish them too slow, they're not going to look quite right. They're going to be on the top of the water, not making enough noise. You want to fish them at just the right speed. Now, the speed wake from 6 Sense is one where you can fish as fast as you want. It's not going to blow out on you. So That's one thing that I really like about that bait, and it's a bait that I intend to fish a fair amount this upcoming summer. Now, two other baits that are wake baits that I throw a fair amount are rats and bats. So these two have gotten a fair amount of work done for me in the past few seasons. And this is Ron's favorite bait of all time, and it is the Morning Dawn colored Spro Rat. I'm joking, but no, Ron, the Jitterbug I think is really considered a crawler style bait. So yeah, it falls more into the category of like this bat, which is going to freak out in the water, right? So maybe it's in that wake bait category, but the rat is really in that category. It's a single jointed swim bait type of deal, but this is a nighttime bait in my opinion. Of course, you can throw it at low light times. You can throw it in the middle of the day, but the rat is freaking sweet. I like the Savage Gear rat, and I like the Spro rat. And for whatever reason, they have a small knocker in them. Doesn't put out a ton of noise, but fishing this thing deadly slow, and then killing it, and then fishing it deadly slow, speeding it up, kill it. I have gotten some great bites, especially at nighttime on the rat. I've got it in all four sizes, ranging from the giant 50 size that weighs like 2.5 ounces to that middle and the smaller and even smallest size. So 50, 40, 30, and like a 25. Anyway, last up on the list is a frog, okay? You guys gotta know, a frog is an absolutely killer summertime pond fishing bait. Might be one of the most popular on the market. And for good reason. You are going to have slightly worse hookup ratio with a frog than you are any other type of bait. But you can catch fish out of places where you won't be able to catch them on anything else. So there is a wide variety of frogs that I throw, but I'm going to give you like my top 5 or so. And so first is the Booyah Pad Crasher. Very, very cheap, simple, straightforward bait. One of the more popular frogs on the market. It's made well, stays extremely weedless, and it holds up reasonably well. So for like $7, it's really tough to beat because you're rarely going to have issues with them. There are other baits in a similar price range that I have seen issues with, whether you're getting baits that are torn out of the package or that have upturned hooks that don't allow the bait to come through heavier, padded, thick cover nearly as well. So my 2 favorite frogs to throw that are standard walking style frogs that have this pointed nose are the KVD Sexy Frog. Couple of reasons are that it's got a very straightforward profile, an awesome hook on there. It's a 3/0 Gamakatsu double frog hook, and depending on where you get them, a lot of them come stock with a rattle, a little weight built into the bait. So I like how collapsible the body is, soft but not too soft. Great, great hook on there, okay? And then the other one that is perhaps my all-time favorite is the Live Target. Super, super realistic design on these guys. This one costs just a couple bucks more, something like $12. But softest body of really any frog on the market. Super collapsible. Also very sticky, sharp hooks. Great hooks on these. I don't know who makes them, but great frog here. Only thing is durability. It's going to last a few less fish than the KVD is. And then when it comes to popping frogs, you know, I do throw that pad crasher in a popping version, but my favorite popping frog on the market is the Spro Bronzeye popping frog, okay? 417, what's up, dude? So the Spro frogs, in my opinion, have just a little bit tougher of a body. Most of them do. So you do really need to jack the fish when you set the hook. But again, these have like that same hook as the Strike King. It's got a Gamakatsu hook in there and super sharp. So once you get them, assuming you hook the fish, your hook up to landing percentage ratio is going to be remarkable. Now another one that is relatively new to me, but one that I am really looking forward to putting to use this year, and we'll probably pick up a couple more colors of, is the Evergreen Shower Blows frog. This is the, I forget what they call it, but SB something. And it's got a fur tail, so it's made with fur instead of silicone, and it's got that Shower Blows head to it. So this thing is made to walk well in open water, but also come across heavy cover quite well. So it's got some slots for the hooks to kind of rest in. And then it's got a very collapsible, soft body. It's got a weight placed in the butt so that when it's in open water and you're not walking it, it will sit with the butt down. And then as you walk it, it will walk well and it will spit. So the Shower Blows from Evergreen is a sleeper. A little bit more expensive of a frog. Now, last one that's a little bit controversial, but I do like, is the Tackle Sprinkler frog. Now, one thing that I mentioned that I don't like about some frogs is when the hook does not line up with the body. So look at this. If you look, you'll notice that the hook is not flush with the body. So if you're fishing this across heavy matted vegetation, it's going to pick stuff up as you're bringing it through there. And I don't love that. So you almost have to be careful and buy these in person where you can. I know Dick's Sporting Goods used to carry them quite well. But these, you know, I've got one that I really like and 2 or 3 that I don't. So, you know, this bluegill one, for example, does sit pretty well. Sits flush. What I like about this design is it's got hooks that are turned up. Just the way that it's designed. The hooks are already bent up. A lot of people bend the hooks out on their frogs. But Tackle, they're manufactured by the same company as Reaction Innovations. So like the Swamp Donkey from Reaction Innovations has that same hook that is already pointed up. It's that same hook. So pretty cool deal there. Better hookup ratio. But one thing that I will do from time to time is modify my frogs, remove the silicone legs, and I will glue in a swivel, throw on a split ring, And then, like here, I've got an owner CPS spring, and then I've put the legs of a couple Ultra Vibe speed worms on there and created my own little Teckle sprinkler frog. I've also put a couple BBs for rattles inside this bait. So you can get creative and make your own as well. You know, the Booyah makes the Toad Runner in this smaller size and then in a larger size. I've had the same issues with the hooks not sitting flush with a lot of these baits. And I've also had issues with the Booyah Toad Runner with the gap not being wide enough on these baits. So after the bait collapses, you really don't have a lot of clearance to set the hook on the fish, which is disappointing in my opinion. So again, just my opinion on a lot of the frogs that I like to throw. And that does it for the top 10 of the baits that I just went through. So again, what's up, Corey? I don't have the Trixie Sharks. No, dude. So the other thing that I didn't talk about that kind of falls into that same category is the soft plastic toad. I'm not going to pull all these out and talk about toads for a long time right now, but the cool thing about a toad is it falls somewhere between a Whopper Plopper / buzzbait and a frog. So you can fish it in those same places. You're going to fish it more like a buzzbait, but you can fish it in the same places that you would a frog, or on the edges of those lily pads or thick matted cover. So really like a soft plastic toad as well. I've got a fair amount of tricks up my sleeve, Ron. Don't worry about it. Okay, so again, number one was a Texas rig. My top recommendations are to throw a Craw style bait, Beaver style bait like the Strike King Rage Bug or Rage Menace Grub, or a worm like I talked about the Zoom Ole Monster worm. You know, the Powerbait Power Worm in the 7 or the 10-inch are great options. Number two, and usually that Texas rig, I'm going to throw pegged on a, 3/16 or a 1/4 ounce weight and like a 4/0 worm hook. Okay. Number two is a Wacky Rig worm. Usually I'm throwing a 5-inch stick bait. Talked about the Berkley Powerbait General. Either in the standard or the max scent are great options. I talked about the Zoom Magnum Finesse Worm. Talked about the 6 Sense Clout. Talked about the Strike King Z2 Elastec bait on a weighted Wacky Rig. And I talked about the Bass Pro Shops Sticko, especially in the 6-inch version because of how cost effective they are if you're fishing around bigger fish. So, number three was a floating jerkbait. I talked about 3 hard baits that I like to throw. The Rapala floating minnow, which is a balsa wood jerkbait. I talked about the Yo-Zuri pins minnow, which is a floating jerkbait. They also make it in a suspending version, but I'm talking about the floating version. And then lastly was the Rebel floating minnow. All 3 of those in like a same small size between 6 and 8 centimeters, roughly in a 1/8 ounce weight. Okay? So that's spinning gear material, but in that same category is the soft plastic jerkbait or the Fluke. So I'll throw this on a weightless Texas rig with like a 4/0 EWG hook, usually in more like a Superline, a thicker gauge wire hook, and I'll throw that on a bait caster with about 15-pound fluorocarbon. And like I showed you, I will rig that further back in the nose of the bait so that it's more likely to dive horizontal or down in the water as you're working the bait instead of go up if you've got it rigged too far forward. Okay? Number 4 was the Chatterbait. I talked about the jackhammer, but then I diverted and talked about a few great weedless options in the Z-Man Project Z and the Z-Man CrossEyeZ Chatterbait. Great options for fishing around wood and also around grass. So it depends on the type of cover that you're fishing around. In my opinion, the jackhammer is still king. The Thunder Cricket is a great, slightly toned down version of the jackhammer. But if you're not wanting to forego that price, or you're fishing around a lot of timber or in bodies of water that you're less familiar with, you might want to step down your chatterbait game. Number 5 was a swim jig. Usually I'm in a pond, I'm going to throw a lighter swim jig, like a 1/4 ounce. This is the Strike King Tour Grade swim jig with a 3.8-inch Keitech on the back. I also will make my own with the Strike King Squadron head. And then sometimes I'll step up my swim jig game and throw something like a 3/8 ounce swim jig head with a 5/0 hook and something like a 5/0 or a 5-inch swim bait like this Beast Coast Miyagi swimmer. Number 6 was a soft plastic swim bait. And I like to throw them 2 different ways. Either straight up on an exposed jig head, again like the Strike King Squadron or the 6 Sense Divine swim bait jig head, or I will go weedless and throw it on like an Owner Beast weighted, keel weighted, belly weighted swim bait hook, either in a 4/0 or a 6/0. I'll throw the 4/0 on swim baits that are right in that 4 to 5-inch range, and I'll throw the 6/0 for baits that are 5 or 6 inches. Okay? Number 7, we switched over to top water, talked about the Whopper Plopper. My recommendations are the 110 and the 75. I didn't mention, but I also like throwing the Berkley Chapo and the Savage Gear. What do they call it? The I don't even know, but I throw the Whopper Plopper like 90% of the time. Number 8 was a topwater popper. I like to throw the larger, either 3/8 or 1/2 ounce size poppers so that I can throw them on a bait caster. I'll throw them on like a 6'8" or upwards of a 6'10" rod. With like either 10 to 12 pound monofilament or like a 20 to 30 pound braid, sometimes with a monofilament leader, sometimes just straight braid, depending on the situation. Number 9 was a wake bait, and I throw wake baits of all kinds, but probably my go-to would be like the Rat from Spro in the size 40 specifically. That one is like the same as the Whopper Plopper 110. So about a 1 ounce size, very castable on a medium heavy or heavy rod where you could bomb the thing out, work it back slow on heavier braid, and you'll get bit a lot. I also like to throw things like the Speed Wake or like the 2.5 KVD square bell body in the wake bait, or the 6 Sense Movement 80 wake bait, I think it's called. I'm not nervous, dude. Don't worry about it, Chris. Um, dude, I've just had a tough time getting my voice back over the past month. I've had like a lingering cough, and you know, I watch my girls on the weekends. We do a lot of hollering, singing, goofing around with each other. So I've been with my girls all day yesterday and today, and my voice is just a little bit shot. So don't worry about it, man. I'm not nervous or anything like that. Um, and number 10 was a frog, guys. I talked about a bunch of hollow body frogs. Um, so, for the most part, that covers the vast majority of situations that you're going to run into in ponds. A couple of honorable mentions that I did not mention are a square bill crankbait and a lipless crankbait. A square bill, I'm going to throw around riprap, around rock, also around laydowns. If you're looking to deflect off of cover where you couldn't throw a chatterbait or a swim jig quite as effectively, square bill can be a great option in ponds with rock in them or a little bit more wood. And a lipless crankbait is great for either deeper water or super grassy situations. However, lipless crankbaits in ponds, you want to be a little bit picky about what you use. So I would probably only recommend a few specific ones. The Strike King Red Eye Shad is a good one. The Bill Lewis Rattle Trap and the Cotton Cordell Super Spot are great options. And then, of course, you could size down and go with like a 3/8 or a 1/4 ounce trap and be able to fish a little bit faster in shallow water. So that pretty much covers it, guys. I've been yipping and yapping for a while now. Hope you guys are having a good night. You guys have not been very active in the chat. Ron asked, what toad do I prefer? So my number one toad is the Keitech Noisy Flapper. Okay? I will pull them out real quick. There's really 3 that I throw more than anything. So the Keitech Noisy Flapper is awesome because it's made from a dual density soft plastic, so it is going to be able to be fished at a very slow speed. It's also designed to take 2 different types of hooks. You can fish it on a keel weighted EWG style hook like the Owner Beast or a weightless EWG style hook. They make the Beast that's not weighted. So there's a slit right down the middle, or you can throw it on a frog hook. It's a double hook, and it's made to tuck the points of those hooks right into these ridges along the edges of the bait. It's got pretty substantial flanged flappers on the back of it, and a very interesting design in terms of body profile. So really, really like that bait. Ton of detail went into it. Second most favorite is probably the Strike King Rage Tail Rage Toad. Just because it's got essentially the same design as the Horny Toad, but where the Horny Toad is more subtle and a long profile, the Rage Toad is a lot more aggressive. And now it makes a lot of noise and displaces a lot of water. So the Rage Toad is probably my second favorite. And then my third is the good old-fashioned Stanley Ribbit. Okay? It's a much tougher soft plastic made for a single frog hook, but it's a skinny profile and it's got really good kickers on it. So That said, they also make the Stanley Top Toad, which is made for a double frog hook, one that Stanley makes, in fact. So I think Stanley is a great option for toads as well. But the Keitech Noisy Flapper and the Striking Rage Toad are really my favorite too. Okay. So, any other questions that you guys might have, throw them at me. Otherwise, I'm losing my voice more than I need to today. I've been talking all day with my daughters and then with my wife for an hour or two after she woke up, before she went to work. So I'm going to dip out of here in a minute. But if you've got anything that you want to talk about, blast it at me in the comments. And yeah, really appreciate you guys hanging out. There's 6 people in here right now. 12 thumbs up. If you haven't already, hit that thumbs up button for me. Do me that solid. And yeah, really appreciate you guys chilling. Looks like I'm going to work through both of these drinks right now. Also, I want to give a big shout out to Bassless Chap, aka Ron Holly, for the suggestion on tonight's topic. You know, I do like it when this is a little bit more of an interactive conversation where you guys are popping off in the comment section, hanging out amongst yourselves, but also asking me stuff, and we can be chatting with each other. I don't necessarily love this quite as much for me to do like a more formal presentation style video on a live stream, but this was still a good time, and I hope you guys were able to get something out of it. Again, if you have any follow-up questions, hit me up either in the comment section of this video after it's posted, or send me an email or a text, or hit me on Instagram, whatever. I am always open to chatting about whatever, whenever. So, thank you guys for hanging out. Cheers to all of you. Hope you have a great rest of your Saturday night. Good Sunday tomorrow. And who knows? Maybe by the next time I see you, I will have another child in my family. So, again, my wife is due in 3 weeks from now, but is most likely to give birth here in the next week or so. So if I don't see you next weekend, it's because I'm probably in the hospital. Otherwise, I'll give you the update next time I see you. So appreciate you guys hanging out. Have a good one. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers, guys.